What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast on a very eventful Thursday here. A lot to get to. Last 2 days of training camp practice, have some observations to get to, some injury updates as well, Ryan Talbot. It is a lot was happening down in Orchard Park today.
Yeah, sounded like a very busy day, eventful in maybe some of the worst possible ways, but we'll get into that right now.
We will. Shout is brought to you by Amtrak. It offers frequent departures daily from Niagara Falls, Buffalo, all the way to New York City. Stops include Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Schenectady, Albany, Hudson, Poughkeepsie, Rhinecliff, and more. So many benefits of taking Amtrak instead of driving, like no middle seats, plenty of leg room, reclining seats, free Wi-Fi, no baggage fees, and kids even ride 50% off. Riding Amtrak is an experience, a fun and relaxing way to get to your destination. All right. Tre'Davious White. Let me take you through the injury. First and foremost, we'll talk about the potential ramifications after that. The Bills were running some 11 on 11 today inside the stadium. And at one point, it was a physical practice, right? It was a chippy practice. We'll get into that as well. Trey goes down. He tries to stand up, isn't able to put any weight on I believe it was his right foot, but don't quote me on that, or right leg. He ends up getting a shoulder from Mitchell Trubisky and another Bills teammate, hobbles off to the sideline, immediately walks over to the mats there, the pads. Kind of looked frustrated for obvious reasons. Athletic trainers attended to him for a few moments. He eventually was able to kind of walk on his own on the sideline. He walked into the tunnel. And I think everybody thought he was going to walk to the locker room area. Focus back on practice. A couple moments later, you look back, and there he is back in the tunnel entrance to the stadium. And they brought a cart out. He gets in the front seat of the cart, and they take him out to get looked at by trainers. I think Joe B made a really good observation.
Yep.
The fact, like, hey, listen, it's a long way to go back up the tunnel and back over to the Bills field house. So maybe it was just an idea like we want to get him looked at ASAP. We don't want him walking that far. So you hope for the best here. But if Trey White's out for any significant amount of time, this all of a sudden becomes a serious problem for the Bills, who were already pretty light at cornerback with Maxwell Hairston working his way back from the knee injury. This now puts potentially Dane Jackson with players that are on the roster right now as the projected opening day starter at cornerback 2. Obviously, Jamarcus Ingram in the mix as well. Dorian Strong, the rookie, I don't think he's there yet. The Bills have a very big concern here at depth cornerback.
Yeah, massive concern. And again, we don't know exactly what happened to Trey White yet. The cart part by Joe B was a great point, because even at training camp, sometimes you just bring out the cart if you have to go a long distance to go to a medical tent. Justin Fields, for example, at the Jets, he was carted off at one point, which made it look serious, and he was back at practice the next day. So you're hoping it's something minimal with the foot, with the ankle, with the lower body, whatever the case may be. But you obviously feel for Trey White, coming back from 2 serious lower leg injuries, having a really strong summer, putting himself in position to be a week 1 starter opposite Christian Benford with everything that happened to Max Hairston, and then potentially for something to happen today. So depth-wise, the Bills are in a tough spot, because even yesterday when, Sean McDermott was speaking to the media, they haven't ruled out starting Max Hairston on the IR to start the year for 4 weeks. And doesn't mean they're going to do it, but it might give you a time frame of, okay, he might not be ready, for the first few weeks of the season. So now you throw Trey White in the mix, and you're looking at the options left. I would go Jamarcus Ingram above Dane Jackson based on their summers. But Ingram's had an up and down summer as well, so they could go with who started more games in the system. Either way, it's a problem looking at the roster right now.
Dane Jackson, like I've mentioned on this show multiple times, he's one of my favorite Bills players that I've covered. Like from a personal standpoint, like he's always good with his time. He's got a great positivity around him. He struggled though. If I'm being unbiased here this summer, it's not been a great summer for Dane Jackson. I feel like to go into the season with him as your starting cornerback puts you in a rough spot. 4 hours ago, I was probably projecting that he'd get cut and maybe as a priority practice squad player to bring back and be in the mix as a depth option if you needed it. So now things change dramatically. And I still think the Bills can do some things. There's some free agents out there. I think Stephon Gilmore is still out
Yeah.
there. Rasul Douglas obviously makes the most sense because he was just with the Bills, year and a half in their system. Probably be easier to get him back in the mix. The problem is anybody that you bring in as a free agent, Asante Samuel Jr. still out there, it's going to take them some time to get the download here on what they're doing, get back assimilated. Rasul Douglas, I'm sure, has been working out away from the facility, but is he in game shape? Does his conditioning in a spot where you're willing to put him on the field against the Baltimore Ravens in less than 3 weeks? That's a big question that has to be answered. And I think no matter what the severity of this thing is for Tre'Davious White, like the only thing that probably puts you in a spot where you don't have to make a move, if it's something that's a week-to-week injury and something that maybe he can get back and practicing for the week of the opener. That's the best case scenario right now as we sit here. We'll wait to find out more details in the next 24 to 48 hours. But either way, I feel like the Bills are at a spot where they're going to have to make a decision at cornerback. I mean, if you are at any point considering injured reserve for Maxwell Hairston here in the next week, I think you have to go make a move regardless, because I think you want to bring somebody in here that is going to have a chance to be in the mix. If not a starter, if you have to go with Dane Jackson or Jamarcus Ingram, at least somebody that you can maybe go with if things don't go well for that player, and you have to make another corresponding move in week 2 or week 3.
Yeah, there's limited options too. With the veterans that you mentioned, they would know full well that once Max Hairston is back and ready, he's probably taking or claiming that starting job. That's something you have to decide. The limited cap space that the Bills have is less than ideal in terms of who you can bring in. Now, there's still levers they could pull to free up some extra money, but I think Rasul Douglas, he's turned down a few offers from Miami. Maybe it wasn't a money issue more so than a fit or the culture. Stephon Gilmore would probably be the best option out there, but like you said, he has not played in this system and he would need a few weeks to get ramped up. You can't just throw a player out there week 1. You're risking them getting hurt with some kind of lower body injury, something happening there, hamstring, quad, you name it. Because they're probably not necessarily in game shape. All these guys are training. There's no doubt about that, but there's a difference between training on your own and game shape, especially with a full training camp come and gone, preseason almost come and gone. So the options out there are not necessarily the best in terms of free agency. Trades, we saw a ton of trades just in the last 24 hours in the NFL. But again, it comes down to cap space and what the Bills can, financially maneuver.
The thing about how they constructed the cornerback room, like I'm not going to sit here and repaint my takes about how they did it. I was very high on the approach of going cornerback in the draft. I do think that going with Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson, you're almost throwing 2 darts and hoping one of them sticks to the board as guys that have been in your system. But in hindsight, it almost feels like maybe they should have gone with an alternate approach. I do still feel like, the Maxwell Hairston injury is what it is, right? Like that you can't predict or plan for that sort of thing. And I know Tre'Davious White was probably ahead in the competition when Hairston went down. Who's to say that Hairston doesn't come out in the preseason games, have himself a couple of nice performances and get himself locked into the starting spot? That definitely could have been a part of this scenario. But I think as we sit here now and all the lost reps for Maxwell Hairston, you do have to make an adjustment. And you do have to maybe consider going out and bringing somebody in. I don't think Dorian Strong is at a spot where he can be relied upon for anything for the 2025 season. So much so that I was even considering him as a cut on my 53-man roster projection. If they stand pat right now, I think he makes the roster as somebody that you can continue to try to develop. But I think that would also be the Bills saying we're okay with Dane Jackson and Tre'Davious White going into the season. And that plan could quickly have to change depending on how that performance is early on in the season. Another player I want to, let me get your thoughts on that and Dorian Strong before we get to Zy Alexander here.
So with Jackson and White, it's something I said in our last episode. The Bills get a little bit too comfortable with running it back sometimes. And, No, if you want to bring one of the players back, starting experience in the system, knowledge of the system, especially when you're going to draft a rookie and they're going to be a good wealth of knowledge along with Christian Benford, I get that. But the inactivity out there in free agency in terms of bringing in another quality player that could compete for a spot was a little, frustrating, I think, if you're a Bills fan. And you can't imagine how this was going to play out, to your point. But I think we've been sitting here for months now saying, I don't know if they've done enough at cornerback with the moves that they made in free agency. You're putting a lot on Hairston to come in and start. Then he gets injured. And now, lo and behold, we're waiting here. We're waiting to see what's going on with Trey White. It's just a bad situation all around. And, Dorian Strong, he flashed at times this summer. He had some good moments, but you're not getting a Christian Benford situation out of him. That was a dart that the Bills took on a kid from Villanova that fit their scheme, and he came right in from day one and looked the part. Strong's had a roller coaster ride, ups and downs, and that's to be expected for a day 3 pick. I think there's some good traits there. I think he does fit the scheme nicely, but you don't want to have to throw him out there for any kind of valuable reps this season.
I know a lot of people, and maybe you're coming from your own observations, but I've been very, very unimpressed with Dorian Strong over the course of the entire summer. I mean, there haven't been a lot of highlights for me. And when I watch him in one-on-ones, he struggles. When we've seen him in team drills, when he's gone up against the starters, he's struggled. And so now we're at a point where I think you have to get real serious about this room and the fact that if you're handing out a roster spot to this player, and they just ended up releasing Caden Prather. I know it was for injury concerns, but you can't hand out developmental roster spots at this point where this team is at. And so I think that, listen, it's been trial by fire. He's had a lot of big time matchups over the course of the summer. And part of that is the Maxwell Hairston injury, but you're right. He's not a Christian Benford, and they go out with some injuries at cornerback. They go out and they bring in Zy Alexander, who I think is a very interesting player to add to the mix. And listen, this is one practice. I don't want to overreact to it today, but he had an interception today in one-on-ones working against Tyrell Shavers that was a highlight level play that I had not seen from Dorian Strong all summer. And so now you start to think about, this was a UDFA, went unsigned, got picked up by Seattle. He ends up getting released here over the last week or two. The Bills bring him in, getting a long look at him. He's a tall, very thin defensive back that I think, it's interesting. I don't know if he ends up on the Bills practice squad, if he gets a chance to maybe flash in the preseason game and maybe play alongside Dorian Strong, come in after Dorian Strong, however that ends up playing out. But there's a competition, I think, brewing here. He hasn't really been worked into team drills, and now we won't get to see the team drills now moving forward the rest of the summer.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm at a place where if I'm doing a 53-man roster projection right now today, before the Tre'Davious White injury, Dorian Strong's not making the team.
Oof. Well, and, the few practices I was at training camp, I saw some flashes from him, but you were there obviously every day, so you saw more of that roller coaster ride.
I like when we disagree sometimes.
No, I do too.
It's spicy on this thing.
That's right. So, I'm not backing off of that. When I was there, he made some nice plays. He had some good coverage. I thought he did flash. Zy Alexander, I feel like he's actually been a free agent for maybe a month. He got released pretty quickly by the Seahawks. It was a non-football injury early on after he was added as a UDFA, but he was one of the premier UDFAs after the draft was over, and he was really interesting at LSU. I believe 1 year in college he led I know he led the team in interceptions at LSU. He's kind of a ball hawk, knows for the football. He tested extremely poorly in terms of his 40 time, a lot of that, and it knocked him way down because there were mock drafts before the combine where he was a early day 3 pick, 4th round, 5th round type of player. And then after that, you're talking 7th to UDFA, which is obviously UDFA is the route that he went. The talent was there. The ability was there. It's just those testing numbers, I think, scared a lot of teams off because in today's NFL, if you don't have speed at the cornerback position, even adequate speed, you're not going to usually carve out a successful career. There have been a few exceptions in terms of 40 times, obviously, that we've seen, but it's good that he's came in here on day 1 and made a big play.
So the tough part for Alexander is he showed up for training camp with a non-football injury.
Right.
So maybe something in the workout period. So he didn't even get a chance to get to training camp with the Seahawks. So that's definitely very good intel, because this was the first team that was able to kind of come back around with an opportunity to give him a shot. And I think there are opportunities in this room. I think the toughest part about this whole scenario is the outlook for Maxwell Hairston, because I feel like if he was in the mix, no matter what was going on elsewhere, if he was healthy, you probably almost look at this like a not a positive. You're hoping that Tre'Davious White is good, but I don't think Tre'Davious White was necessarily signed in April to be the day one cornerback 2 starter opposite Christian Benford. Whoever they drafted was going to be the guy that I think a lot of fans were hoping was going to get that opportunity. So
Right.
we'll see what the update is on Hairston. The one good news piece of news on him that I'll pass along: yesterday, he was doing work off to the side. He was on the bike. He was doing the ropes. He was doing the medicine ball. That's pretty encouraging. He still has he's got a pretty sizable brace on his knee. So I still think we're a couple weeks away to where he could even start to do some return to football prep work, like in terms of cutting and backpedaling, all those kind of things. But at least we're here now. We're
Right.
getting kind of closer. I don't think there's any world where he's ready to go for week 1 against Baltimore after missing all of his practice time.
Yeah, trending in the right direction, but still a ways away is probably the best way to put that. And I do want to kind of put something out there on the radar, Matt, about week 1. Yesterday, Lamar Jackson gets his foot stepped on, according to the team. Nothing major, but then he doesn't practice today. That puts up a little bit of a red flag. Because someone said he was shaking his hand and wrist in terms of the beat reporters. Team says, nope, foot was stepped on, he's fine. And he doesn't practice today. Just something to monitor. I'm sure he's going to be fine for week 1. Baltimore's probably taking a cautious approach. But we're seeing a lot of, injuries, a lot of things happening in training camps across the league. A potential injury to Jalen Wright, for instance, today in Miami. So a lot of teams are getting hit with injuries left and right. It's not just Buffalo. I wanted to bring that up because we get a lot of things on the insiders, a lot of things on social media about the training staff, the coaching staff. It's been a bad summer for a lot of teams in terms of injuries. This isn't just a Buffalo thing.
Marino's legacy, with a comment here that I think is interesting, worth talking about for a second. The Chiefs in 2022 drafted 5 defensive backs. And if you remember, that group, I think, was highlighted by Trent McDuffie. I mean, they had guys that were like starting in the Super Bowl that were rookies on that defense, and a lot of DBs. 4 rookies starting in the 2022 AFC Championship game versus the Bengals. What's going on with the drafting here in Buffalo? Daquan Hardy and Strong potentially both cut coming up here. I will say, I think Daquan Hardy has had a decent summer. They've put him more on the perimeter than I think anybody thought when they drafted him. I'm low on Strong. Some people have been a little bit higher on his summer, and I guess that'll be a better question and worth watching and really diving into this Saturday against the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Right.
I mean, Strong's going to play a ton. Hardy's going to play a ton. You're looking at the defensive backs. I mean, Joe Dana's been here the last 2 years. He took over for John Butler, and that was a strength of this team while Butler was here, right? Like drafting and developing guys. A lot of these guys developed under him. Then you look at the moves that they've made this offseason, or last offseason, it was Jamal Adai at cornerback. He was kind of tasked with Kyrie Elam, and that never really materialized. He works with a lot of the younger DBs now, and then they brought in Mike Pellegrino, who was the Nichols coach in New England. He's now working with Taron Johnson and company here. So I think it's a valid point to question the ability to develop talent there. There have been some guys that have been drafted at cornerback and not outside of like a Christian Benford, who I think probably still goes back to John Butler. Not a lot of talent developed here. Taylor Rapp's a guy that came over from the Rams.
Yeah, it is something to monitor because we've had, we being the Bills, that is, have had coaches that have come in and done a good job developing. You mentioned John Butler and his track record that he had. Obviously, Bobby Babich, he worked with the safeties. He worked with the linebackers. Now he's the defensive coordinator, so he had some success. You look at the defensive line, though, there's been a lot of hits and misses there. So sometimes it probably does come down to coaching and development. And The Bills might be lacking in some of those areas over the years. I'm not just talking about this current regime or coaching staff. Obviously, a lot of new faces brought in this year that you mentioned, and then up front as well, that I think are good coaches. So coaching goes a long way in this league. When it came to Kansas City and that specific comment that was brought up, there was a lot of turnover that needed to happen on that defense. And the fact that they had to play so much really benefited them come playoff time in Kansas City.
Let's keep this thing going. Give you the last dive into practice. Ryan, this was a chippy day today, and it really got started yesterday when Josh Allen put a ball out over the middle to Dalton Kincaid, and Taylor Rapp came firing down and gave him a pretty good pop. Kind of like snapped back a little bit, went down, didn't make the catch. And you could tell immediately Taylor Rapp knew, oh man, I messed up, right? So he gets up, he puts his hand up, kind of comes off, knows that he can't lay the boom like that in the practice setting against their guys. So fast forward to today, the Bills starters got quite a bit of work today. They were working on 3rd and long, which is always a really tough, especially for the offense. And at one point, DeMar Hamlin put a hit on somebody. It might have been Ray Davis. I can't remember now. And Josh Allen even came in chirping after the fact, like not happy with the level of physicality on that play. I'm sure the defense is trying to set the standard. A couple plays later, Taylor Rapp again comes in and puts a shot on Elijah Moore, who took exception to it, took the football, threw it at Rapp. They exchanged words. Both sides kind of come in, big skirmish on the field, ended with Deion Dawkins looking like he was about to fight 4 or 5 Bills defensive linemen there. You don't want your all-pro borderline or a Pro Bowl left tackle involved in that situation. Taylor Rapp kind of got sent off the field. He's kicking footballs on the sideline. The Taylor Rapp thing is interesting because like he's kind of known for the friendly fire nickname because of some of the plays, even in regular season games that have happened. I was talking to Dane Jackson about it after practice today. It's hard for some guys to turn that off, but you almost have to turn it off because somebody's going to get hurt in this spot. And I know, I think defensive players like the physicality, like the energy and the juice that he brings, but that's a dangerous game to play there when you're dealing with your own offensive players.
Yeah, especially this close to the start of the regular season. And you mentioned it. He has a history of this. He's overly physical with his own teammates and players, and that's not great. And I get it. That's not a switch that a lot of guys can just flip on and off. And I'm in a practice setting, I'm going to go half speed, 3/4 speed. He just kind of goes, and with the way that he plays, if he's going to make contact, he's usually going at a pretty high level of speed. But something has to be done there in terms of getting it through his head that you can't keep popping your own guys. Kincaid, a guy that's supposed to be a big time contributor. Elijah Moore, a player that, playing for a roster spot this Saturday, potentially.
I disagree.
You think he's on?
I think he's the lock.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit, I'm not saying it's a hot take, but I've seen some people say that don't know if you've seen enough out of him. I think that's fair, though, in terms of the wide receiver room, the injuries that have taken place, the fact that he hasn't maybe had a lot of preseason opportunities with the quarterback play given to him and what you've seen at practice more than anything else. But he's still someone that's trying to get, more reps in the system, I guess, is another way of saying it, too, where if you're hitting him and taking him out potentially, that hurts his chances of being a contributor in this offense.
The thing for Moore is that there's been enough when he's been on the field with Josh Allen this summer that makes me think that they at least like the beginning stages of what he can mean for this offense and for Allen. I also think with Shakir out the last couple of weeks, he has been going back to training camp. We can't report positions when we get here, but going back to training camp, he was playing at the slot. He's been in the slot in the games. You take the game last week and he had a couple of drops. The one was really bad. I'd be interested to see how much he plays this week. It's not a crazy contract. He signed a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. All of it's guaranteed though. So I think that is something that also plays in here. It's not a ton of money, but to just eat all of that and the versatility that I think that he offers, I'm not necessarily worried. This is a guy that's produced in the league. And he's kind of in a lot of ways similar to Samuel. The difference is this summer, especially, he's been banged up a couple of times and he's come right back. Whereas Samuel seems to need these long kind of periods where he's out of the mix. So I think we're going to end up, I like your 53-man roster projection. I like the idea of like a Curtis Samuel trade from a salary cap relief standpoint. I just don't know that even with the draft pick juice, I guess you would say, that another team would get on a deal like that, and go check that out over at Syracuse.com and NewYorkUpstate.com. The Bills draft picks aren't as valuable because a 5th round pick for the Bills is kind of like a 6th rounder, right? Because they're picking at the end of rounds all the time. So I'd be very curious to see if Bean can pull something like that off. And then to me, a deal like that is an all-in, cards on the table for Tyrell Shavers, which I don't think is necessarily out of the realm of possibility. We talked to him after practice today, and I might write about this for this weekend, how much time he spent working on the special team side of this. I think he could be a 4-phase special teamer, which then puts him into the mix as maybe a 6th wide receiver, and maybe in his own little bucket. We'll see. But a lot of complicated conversations around the end of this roster, which I don't think that we were necessarily anticipating 2 or 3 weeks ago.
No, and I will say this projection was easier to make than my last one because of the injuries, the potential PUP list, IR list, opened up a few extra spots, made it possible for the Bills to carry a 6th wide receiver. But obviously what they do with those potential additional spots, like a Cedric Van Pran Granger, still hasn't been activated off the PUP list. You'd have to think good chance he misses the first 4 weeks of the season. Hairston potentially being on the IR, not knowing what's going on with Trey White now either, obviously. There's a little more wiggle room if the Bills wanted to carry a 6th wide receiver to start the year.
Thank you so much for joining us here on this Thursday. We'll be going for a few more minutes, a couple more odds and ends to get to before I head out to Tampa Bay tomorrow. And keep it locked on. We'll do a tomorrow. I'm going to do something from the stadium when I land. I got some time to kill. So I'll be doing a little quick what am I watching for Bills versus Bucks. I'm not sure if I'll stream it, but I'll definitely post it in some way here on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, like it, this video, subscribe to the channel as well. We really appreciate it. What else do we got to get to, Ryan, before we get out of here?
Really quickly, I wanted Josh Allen not playing in the preseason finale. I see some comments here, more so on social media today. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, they're going to go the Joe Burrow route and the Bengals and the slow starts and some doom and gloom with it. I just wanted to put it out there that I don't think preseason is that meaningful for Josh Allen. Won the MVP last season, played in the preseason, but you know how many pass attempts he made, Matt? I put it in the insider chat today, so if you saw it, then you would know.
I didn't see it, so I can kind of guess.
Okay.
2.
3. He made 3 pass attempts in the preseason last year. It was 2 for 3. The year before that, he did throw like 28 passes in the preseason. Not sure what was up with that. But the year before that, he went 3 for 3 in the preseason. So 2 of the last 3 years, he has made a whopping, 3 pass attempts. This is not something that he has needed a lot of reps for. And the Bills have come out. They've won the division the last 5 years. I think it's a little bit overblown. And a lot of the big quarterbacks in the league have not played this preseason. I think Mahomes has made 1 pass attempt. Lamar Jackson hasn't played this preseason. So there's a lot of top-tier quarterback talent. There was a long list I saw someone post on social media of quarterbacks that have not taken a snap in the preseason. I think it's a little bit overblown.
I agree. And honestly, we've kind of been waiting for this, right? Like a big chunk of the fan base has at least, and a lot of us in the media have talked about just the risk is not worth the reward. And to be able to really dial up situations in practice for Allen and the starters, to me, it's just as valuable. And the upside of that is you don't get hit in those situations. So sure, would you like him to go out there and go through a drive and maybe feel a hit? Sure, but you could do that against Baltimore in week 1. I still think both teams are in that spot. They're not playing Lamar Jackson either in the game. So I think the Bills offense will be pretty dialed in. And listen, they're in a different spot than they were a year ago. A lot of it was new. They had a rookie wide receiver, an entirely new wide receiver room outside of Khalil Shakir. Nobody had ever caught passes from Josh Allen before, and they still figured out a way to kind of start fast and figure things out. So I have no problem with the Josh Allen storyline. Harrison Phillips returning to the AFC East yesterday, traded to the New York Jets. I know I saw a couple of fans saying, "Oh, the Bills should trade for him and make him their 5th defensive tackle." I don't know. I like what the Bills are doing at defensive tackle. I think it's more so a bummer to see him in the division as somebody that was a super big fan favorite. But I'm encouraged about what the Bills have done at defensive tackle.
100%.
And I'm higher on Dwayne Carter than some. I think that some people think that maybe he should be on the roster bubble, whether it be from a trade perspective or otherwise. I don't sit there. I want to see what it looks like for the first 4 to 6 weeks with Ogunjobi out. What Carter can do. Not that necessarily that Ogunjobi is going to fit into the role that the Bills are going to ask him to play, but I do also think that while Deion Walker isn't necessarily the one tech that I think some Bills fans thought when they drafted him, I still think he can play next to Ed Oliver in a lot of spots. And just from his size profile, he's able to kind of maybe pop in that department. But I want to see what it looks like with Carter.
Yeah, I don't think there was a spot for Harrison Phillips here. It was just surprising to see a player that was a team captain 1 year ago projected to start again this year in Minnesota, a team with, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying Super Bowl aspirations because you're going with a young quarterback, but they were really good last year, and they were expected to be pretty good again this year. For them to just trade him and essentially a pick swap, the Jets obviously felt like they needed to address their defensive tackle position. They made 2 trades at the position yesterday. But yeah, a little bit of a bummer to see him in the division after being a fan favorite, someone that still does so many community events for Buffalo.
2 last quick hitters. Keon Coleman, another highlight reel play. Final day of training camp practice. It's open to the media. He wins one-on-one double coverage, probably like a 20-yard touchdown. Drop in the bucket throw from Josh Allen. He gets in between, beats DeMar Hamlin, who had the initial coverage, and then Rapp was in coverage as well. It was just a great catch, contested catch opportunity. Huge play for him. And then a Dawson Knox touchdown later in team drills. Like I mentioned, they were working on the 3rd and longs. He goes for, I think, about 30-yard touchdown. Down the middle of the field, Javon Solomon, mismatch city. But I thought it was interesting because Knox makes that catch. Kincaid on the outside working against, I believe it was Benford on the play, had good coverage. But that's one of the things that the Bills are going to have to find a way to unlock this season with Knox and Kincaid on the field at the same time. Obviously, you're not going to have a lot of matchups where Dawson Knox is on a speed rushing defensive end. But again, it was a really good play. And if they could unlock that package, to me, is the next iteration of this offense, if that's something that Joe Brady can really start to develop.
Yeah, I agree with that. Knox, people, I don't think they forget that he is such a trusted weapon for Josh Allen, but he's been with Allen longer than anyone. They have a good rapport. It's why he's caught like the first touchdown pass in almost every year that the Bills have been in the playoffs with Josh Allen. He's a valuable number 2 tight end for this team. So I'm interested to see what his role looks like. I think the Bills can do a lot of different personnel this year, be more successful with 2 tight ends on the field. Are they going to run jumbo as much? Now you have Hawes as a blocking tight end that can go out and pass catch. What are they going to do? So I think in terms of, what's next for this offense, I think Joe Brady is going to really have some new looks and some new wrinkles. I don't know if you saw the podcast with Coach O with the PFT guys. He talked about how much of a genius Joe Brady was at LSU, and he'd be the last one out of the building, stay crazy hours, and he'd say, Coach, we got him. He'd come up with something, and he knew from an early time that he was going to be a special coach in the league, maybe something I'll even write about tomorrow. But yeah, I think that Brady is going to come in this year and have some new looks and personnel packages for this offense.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. I didn't see the podcast episode. I did see a clip of it, and then Joe Brady was kind of featured in Hard Knocks this week. sorry to say that we didn't have a reaction show, but I didn't know if there was really that much to react to. That's
Hard
another
Knocks,
part.
Yeah.
Dude, Hard Knocks has been like snooze fest, man. I'm
Hard
sorry.
Knocks,
Maybe it's because is it because we're so close to it, Ryan? Because we know this team so well? Or do you feel like this is kind of the thought process from people outside of Buffalo and that don't follow the team?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to there's just not a lot of intriguing storylines. First and foremost, the Cook dilemma wasn't even featured much before he re-signed. Paige in the comments, thank you for that comment. It's I don't know, and it also just feels like this isn't the same Hard Knocks that we grew up with. I think teams over the last few years have had a lot more say of what to air and what not to air. So it's been. I told my wife, I said, Hard Knocks has more fluff than the bakery department at a Walmart. You know, this fluff. Just it has not been intriguing to me whatsoever. I don't know. For the fans, maybe they love it. I thought the first episode had some at least lighthearted, fun moments with Trey White and Deion Dawkins. I think this Tuesday's episode will be the best by far because you're going to be probably seeing the roster cuts. Teams, I think they have up until about 3 p.m. before they can send it to HBO. Obviously, the Bills will have to have their roster set by 4 p.m. So you might get some juicy stuff there.
James asks, when's the next episode of Shout from a Dorm Room? We got about 348 days to go, probably. Maybe we can find some random dorm room to do it in one of the local schools. Maybe Damon will give us a little dorm room studio. That would be pretty baller. It's right down the road from me.
That would be pretty cool.
Anyway. All right, that'll do it for this episode. We're locking this one up. Headed to Tampa tomorrow for the preseason game, which is on Saturday. We'll be back with a post-game episode, but I also will be dropping a video at some point tomorrow with just some a little bit more of a closer look at the players that I'm really watching that have a chance to maybe win a roster spot. I'm going to do it right outside of, is it Raymond James? Is that what it's still called?
Yeah.
Or did they change
my knowledge, it is.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll check out what the name is and see if they've changed it. For Ryan, I'm Matt. We'll see you then. Take care, everybody.